So we're finally here, the big one. One of those serials which changed the history of Doctor Who forever. Or perhaps it would be more appropriate to say it changed its future forever. The first Base Under Siege serial, the first appearance of the Cybermen, and the first regeneration. The Hartnell era is reaching its end. But will it go out with a bang? Or has its status as a classic been inflated by the elements attached? It's time to find out. We begin at Snowcap Base in Antarctica, aka the South Pole. Unlike most past serials, we get an idea of the setting before the TARDIS arrives. The base is overseeing the launch of Zeus 4, a routine orbital flight, but things soon take a turn for the crew of Snowcap when the TARDIS lands and our trio arrive. The TARDIS scene is a brief, but it's quite nice, having them all wrapping up in winter wear as they prepare to explore. There's a fun few interactions, with my favourite being Polly checking that the Doctor will be warm enough in barely anything more than his usual outfit. In fact, it's basically the outfit he was wearing when we first met him in An Unearthly Child, but with gloves. Episode 1 is quite setup heavy, introducing us to the many elements at play, with Snowcap Base and Zeus 4 getting major focus, until we get to the big reveal of Mondas, the titular 10th planet. So Mondas of course is a big part of this serial, but its presence in the serial is a bit strangely handled. Notably the Zeus 4 probe is being drawn off course due to the presence of Mondas and its gravity, but that same gravity isn't having any effect on the rest of the solar system, or at the very least, Earth. This is a more minor thing within the plot, but there is a major problem with Mondas in the serial, which is key to the plot, but it feels too early to talk about that problem. Obviously, another big thing to talk about is the reveal of the serial's villains, with one of the best cliffhangers of the series. As the crew of Snowcap Base try to break into the TARDIS, a spaceship lands nearby and several figures walk across the icy wasteland. Excuse the pun, but this scene is chilling. What appear to be robots until the close-up of a human hand, then the camera moves up to reveal the blank and emotionless face, with the hint of an eye behind the mask. This is probably the greatest villain introduction of the show so far. For as good as the Daleks reveal was, this is just on another level. In a single shot, it gives you all the information you will ever learn about these Cybermen. They just need to fill in the why. The why of course comes in the next episode when we learn of their history, how Mondas drifted away from the solar system, and how the Cybermen evolved to survive. This is of course where we get this iconic moment.
Emotions, love, pride, hate, fear. Have you no emotion, sir?
Hartnell's performance is just so good. The way his expression changes slowly after his grand speech having no effect. Speaking of performances, the Cybermen themselves are equally as strong, in both voice and their physical presence. The voices were provided by Peter Hawkins and Roy Skelton, two of the most notable creature voice actors of the show. Their emotionless performance with the voice effect just makes them sound off-human. Unlike the Daleks, who are very loud and angry voices, the restraint and calm of the Cybermen's voices is unnerving. And it may just be me, but I swear there's always this sense of their voices wanting to have an emotional tone but just can't. On the performances, the actors are really good at being able to keep restraint when they're emoting. While they don't have much choice with their faces, with what they can emote with, that being their arms, the actors don't overly gesture with them. There are moments, but for the most part they kept generally static, which I think helps to separate them from us humans. But I cannot not mention the amazing costumes, a design which rivals the Daleks for how iconic it is. But this is the first iteration, and maybe its best. Unlike the later robotic designs, which would become more prominent as the show went on, these really pushed the horror factor by being built around the idea of these suits hiding the remains of a human. The face especially, it's not metal but cloth that's wrapped tightly around the face, with the only feature being the eyes, which are most often black voids, and the empty mouths, which just hang open when they speak. It's so good at hiding the scarier aspects of the Cybermen, while still displaying the results of that. These once humans are now inhuman, but with just enough resemblance to creep you out. The choice to introduce them in this uninhabitable area just works so well to show how far beyond humans they've become. So with the introduction of the Cybermen, episode 2 spends a lot of time introducing them with Ben being locked up, only to escape and give General Cutler the opportunity to defeat the Cybermen and free the base. Now I'll discuss Ben's escape when I cover him in full, as there's quite a bit to discuss about his character in it, but for now, with the base free of Cybermen, the remainder of the episode focuses on preventing another force from taking control. Then the next episode is about General Cutler's plan to destroy Mondas with the Z-bomb.
By using the Z-bomb.
You can't do that.
I can and I will.
This is due to his son being sent up in Zeus 5 to assist Zeus 4, this occurring while the base was under the control of the Cybermen. So let's talk about Zeus 4 as I'm bringing it up. So as stated earlier, Zeus 4 was being pulled off course by the gravity of Mondas. This led to an attempt to save the craft and crew, but this ended up failing and the ship flew out of orbit into deep space, with it being torn apart in the process. The craft itself isn't important to the story, but its effect on the characters for how it is. When the Cybermen invade, they reveal that there is nothing that can be done to save the craft, but still allow the humans to try, but only to end up failing as the Cybermen predicted. The fact that the Cybermen allow this is very strange for a logical race. It almost feels like they're testing the crew at the base, seeing their actions and reactions. Meanwhile, the crew are just desperate to find a solution to save the ship, with their attempt failing, leading to 2 horrific deaths. While I'm on Zeus 4, I'll discuss the elephant in the room, and that's the forward-thinking and optimistic nature of the crew of the craft, with one of the crew being Glyn Williams, played by Earl Cameron. So obviously for the mid-60s, the idea of a black astronaut was incredible. The idea that in the near future this would be something which would be a part of life. It was a very brave decision by the production team, and I give them applause for doing it. But something which I've never heard mentioned when discussing Glyn Williams is that he's clearly the commander of Zeus 4. He's the one giving the orders, only operating the controls when his fellow crewman needs help. This takes it from just a brave decision to another level, with there not only being a black astronaut, but that he could be in command of the mission. And since I'm talking about Earl, I have to mention that he was also one of few actors from Doctor Who to reach the age of 100, holding the title as the oldest living actor for a while prior to his death in 2020. He may have only been in 2 episodes, but he left his mark on the franchise, and for most modern audiences watching the classic era from the beginning, will be the first person of colour to be seen speaking. The other thing that makes Zeus 4 important is that Zeus 5 was launched to help it. While Zeus 5 isn't introduced until after the destruction of Zeus 4, its presence in space is the important bit, as it affects the actions of the characters, especially General Cutler. The presence of his son in space is what causes Cutler to use the Z-bomb, so Mondas is draining the energy of Earth. I'll get back to that later, but this is affecting both the Zeus craft. There is a constant power loss from Zeus 4, which is what caused it to be unable to readjust course before its destruction, while Zeus 5 only had the power loss while on the side of Earth facing Mondas. Because of this immediate threat to his son, Cutler orders the Z-bomb to be prepared, risking the entire planet for him. I'll address the Z-bomb here. So there are 3 Z-bombs on Earth which are all capable of destroying the entire planet, with one being kept at Snowcap Base. Despite the objections of his men and even the Secretary General who accidentally authorises it,
You do give me authority to take any action necessary against the Cybermen?
Yes, of course. You must do all you can.
this guy's a little bit stupid, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt given the situation. With the help of the scientist Barclay, Ben is able to disable the rocket carrying the Z-bomb, preventing its launch. But Ben doesn't come out of it unscathed, being thrown over a railing and falling a distance which seems a lot shorter than the serial seems to suggest, given it's a rocket shaft. This gives us an incredible cliffhanger. Polly is looking after the injured Ben while a countdown begins for the rocket launch. The crew at the base stand around, all of them tense and sweating as they fear if they'll survive the fallout of the Z-bomb. Fortunately, Ben's meddling worked and so the Z-bomb doesn't launch, but within an instant the Cybermen return and take control of the base once more. So I've got to discuss the Doctor's presence in the story now, due to this being when he makes his big return after being absent from episode 3. As mentioned in my Smuggler's review, Hartnell spent his holiday between production blocks in Cornwall, but prior to this he was informed about the changeover that was going to happen, with him being replaced as the Doctor. Given how connected Hartnell was to the role and the character, this really hit him hard, and so he spent his holiday drinking in various pubs, leading to him developing bronchitis. When it came to the rehearsals for episode 3, Hartnell sent in a note saying he was too ill to attend, which meant that the episode had to be reworked with the Doctor removed, with a stand-in taken over for shots of his back and for his initial keeling over at the beginning. Fortunately, Hartnell was able to return for episode 4, which was definitely something which the production team were worried about, given the changeover which was about to occur. Now, for anyone who has watched 10th Planet, they may have noticed something, especially with episode 3, and that's that the Doctor's disappearance doesn't change the course of the story at all. The only notable thing is that a line which was clearly meant for the Doctor to tell everyone was given to Ben and framed as if the Doctor had said it previously.
But the Doctor said that it's not only Earth that's in danger, but Mondas itself is in far greater danger. Yes, but he said eventually it would absorb too much energy and burn itself out.
Obviously, since there was no way to go back and check, it means that the production team were hoping nobody would notice, but nowadays it stands out like a sore thumb. But the unfortunate thing is, the lack of the Doctor's presence in episode 3 does kind of go a bit unnoticed, as he doesn't do a whole lot in the serial. Given Hartnell's declining health at the time, the Doctor's presence and importance to the serial was greatly reduced, which is why the plot is nonsensical as to the Cybermen's defeat. While he does have importance in episode 1, but with the crew at the base not paying him much attention, in episode 2 it's Polly who does most of the talking with the Cybermen, outside of the Doctor's iconic speech. He doesn't do a whole lot other than just stand around. He does try to warn Cutler towards the beginning, but that's kind of it. He only has about 20 lines of dialogue within that episode, with most of them being quite short. Now this was obviously the production team trying to make it through the final Hartnell serial the best they could, but it really hurts both the Doctor and the serial itself. The serial has to wrap up without the Doctor's involvement, and the Doctor doesn't do much. Even when he makes his return in episode 4, he spends around half of the episode in the Cybermen ship as a captive, with there only being a few scenes set there. Now, to the Doctor's credit, he does try to calm tensions in the base and buy time until the destruction of Mondas, but is soon taken to the cyber ship. Episode 4 is another Ben episode, with him fighting against the Cybermen with radiation. The real lack of the Doctor in this incarnation's final serial is definitely a massive downside. So let's wrap things up with the destruction of Mondas. So Mondas returned to the solar system to drain the energy of Earth, but for some reason it drains too much energy and destroys itself, taking the Cybermen with it, due to them being connected to Mondas. The plot obviously wraps up this way due due to the Doctor's lack of involvement, which means the entire serial is just buying time and waiting for it to end. Now I'm definitely not alone in saying this, but this conclusion is rather bad. So obviously we have the fact that the Doctor doesn't have to do anything, but beyond that we don't have an explanation for anything. Mondas arrives and drains Earth's energy, but it's not explained how or what sort of energy is being drained, and of course why Mondas is able to absorb too much energy from a planet that is near identical to it. The how being key here, as why didn't the Cybermen just stop draining the energy of Earth when Mondas was in danger? Because not like they needed to stop the process from Earth as far as we are aware. So Mondas is just destroyed because it needs to be. Should I at this point note that this serial was co-written by an actual scientist, Kip Pedler, so the well beyond dodgy science of this plot is definitely more annoying because of that. One other thing to note about the science is that in episode 4 there is a sudden weakness given to the Cybermen, with them being killed by radiation. The type of radiation is not stated, but clearly it's something which they haven't a way to protect themselves from. So despite how durable the Cybermen have been shown to be, only weak to their own weapons up to this point in the serial, and being designed to survive inhospitable conditions, are weak to radiation, which humans can protect themselves from with very unconvincing protective gear, which often has open spots. But to wrap up the plot, with Mondas's destruction, the Cybermen are destroyed somehow, leaving the Earth safe from their invasion and energy draining. General Cutler is dead, but his son survived, along with the majority of the crew at the base. But as we know, there is still one more casualty, but we'll come to him once I've covered Ben and Polly. So Ben is probably the most prominent of the trio in the serial, being involved in the majority of the big moments from the serial, or plays a big part in the build up to those. While he doesn't do a lot in episode 1, other than give some good lines which establishes the setting, notably about the moon landings and the computerization, once the action begins in episode 2 he really begins to shine. While his first big moment, as mentioned before, is his escape, which allows the crew to retake the base. He's locked up by a Cyberman, and he manages to escape by blinding the Cyberman with a projector and taking its weapon. This leads to a great character moment for Ben. He's a Navy man and so should be somewhat accustomed to using weaponry, but he's so hesitant, telling the Cyberman to stop moving or he'll be forced to fire, and eventually having to fire and kills the Cyberman. It's just his reaction which really makes the scene. He's just so hit by what he's done, taking someone's life and nearly tearing up over it. For the remainder of the serial, Ben is a bit of a man of action, with him taking the fight to the Cybermen in episode 4 and being the one to disable the rocket in episode 3, which leads to him getting what should be a head trauma from his fall, but he quickly recovers. Polly is at her most prominent in episode 2, with her being in only a few scenes of episode 4 as she was taken to the cyber ship near the beginning. She is the one leading the conversation with the Cybermen in place of the Doctor in episode 2, getting plenty of lines which show the horrific nature of the Cybermen, the lack of emotion and willingness to just allow people to die. There isn't much for her in episode 3. She makes some coffee because it was the 60s, although to the serial's credit, at least it was a case of she was doing it to have a reason to remain in command while both the Doctor and Ben had been removed, although Barclay's comment to her about sticking to coffee making is definitely the worst of this. I don't have much to say about the crew at the base individually. They're not the deepest characters, with the only one being explored being Cutler, who I've already been over. But I will note how nice Barclay's handwriting is. I know this is a stupid detail, but it's so smooth and fluid when he's writing. Plus we have the Italian member of the crew, who is very Italian, or 1960s Britain Italian. So now we've got the big thing to talk about, the final scenes. The threat is finally over, with the Cybermen defeated and Mondas destroyed. Ben goes to rescue the Doctor and Polly, but the Doctor is very weak. The Doctor returns to the TARDIS alone and stands there as the controls go haywire and his companions bang on the door to let them in. But by the time they are inside, the Doctor is on the floor, and as the sound of the TARDIS dematerialisation fills the room, his face glows white and changes into a younger man's. So this is one of the biggest cliffhangers in the show's history. The recasting of Hartnell to Troughton was a big decision for the show, and is what has ensured its continuation for decades. So we've got a lot to talk about with this, but we'll begin with the scenes leading up to the regeneration, Hartnell's final moments. So unfortunately with episode 4 missing, we only have the telesnaps and a few off-air recordings, but these give us a good idea of Hartnell's performance, and it's heartbreaking. You can see it in his eyes. He's not just performing this, he's really feeling this. His last moments on the show, which he has been forced to leave, his sadness is so clear as he speaks to his companions. We're not watching the Doctor leaving, but Hartnell. This continues into the TARDIS scene where he's standing at the console, just holding on in his last moments before his regeneration, while the TARDIS goes haywire. These last moments are amazing, and they're important shows from just how many clips we have of them. And I love the Doctor's final lines.
It's all over. That's what you said. Far from being all over.
What are you talking about?
I must get back to the TARDIS. Immediately.
Are we going to go back and say goodbye or anything?
No, I must go at once.
Oh, well, you better have this. We don't want you catching your death of cold.
Here. Thank you. Keep warm.
Now there was originally meant to be another line he'd say in the TARDIS, this being, No, I will simply not give in. This was cut to give more time for the scene, so that Derek Martinez could get the regeneration film to the best quality possible, and I'm quite glad of it. This regeneration set the scene and tone for how the process would work and how the Doctor should go into it. Despite the fact he's about to die, the Doctor isn't focused on himself, He's focused on his companions. This would later be something we'd see a lot more in later regenerations. He understands what's happening, but they need someone to hold their hand through it. It sets up his species' relationship with death, a new beginning rather than an end. And of course we have the behind the scenes of this scene, how this iconic effect came to be. Originally it was intended that the Doctor would be found with his cloak over his face, with it being revealed he was a different person when the cloak was removed. But due to the genius of visual mixer Shirley Coward, this was changed. Her idea was to use a broken mixing desk to fade between shots of Hartnell and Troughton. This would usually just be a simple fade, but due to the desk being broken, it would cause the image to flare out. It's incredible how this idea to use a broken piece of equipment affected the future of this franchise. So the 10th planet overall is a bit of a mixed bag. It's got plenty of good ideas in it, introducing one of the show's most iconic villains to the franchise and the regeneration itself. It can't be understated the importance of this serial, but it is lacking in some areas. A lot of dodgy science which isn't explained well, and a showing of a diverse future but a real lack of women around. Obviously the biggest problem is that the Doctor doesn't do much, which is where a lot of the plot problems may have stemmed. It is a good showing for the companions, but for the final serial for the first Doctor, it's underwhelming. But now we're heading into an entirely new era for the show, with the Doctor having regenerated, with a new Doctor to be introduced to, but facing him is an old enemy. Next time, the power of the Daleks.